Hello and welcome, everybody, to the show. August 25th, 2016. I appreciate you guys joining us live, and if you're not joining us live, I appreciate you watching later. So I know that we had a conversation last week, very specifically about personal emotional connection and how you can build relationships and use relationships in a way that's more enjoyable, makes your work more enjoyable, more valuable, more worthwhile. And that's obviously, hopefully, after watching the show last week, something that you guys can connect with in a really meaningful way. And we're doing another webinar just a week later, and I know it's quick and it's a quick turnaround, but it's because the two really connect in an important way. And so the theme or the topic for today very specifically is retention, retaining your biggest asset as a programmer, as an organization, specifically your coaches, right? And so what are things that you can do very specifically and actively to help improve your retention within your program for your coaches? And so I brought I asked the retention extraordinaire, and I don't say that lightly, because this fella very specifically has a coach that has been with him, now runs programming in another city, but has been with him for 7 years maybe. But he is the extraordinaire for sure, and that is Corey Miles in Louisiana currently. Hey, Corey.
Hey, guys. How's it going? I like the intro. I'll take that one any time of the week. Appreciate it. Hopefully we can help pass on some knowledge.
How long has Brad been with you? 7, 8 years?
I think 7 years is right there. I think in February will be 8 years.
February will be 8 years. So he's been around longer than a lot of the franchise owners and directors have been, for sure. And you guys have seen Brad on the show before. Brad lives in Birmingham now. Corey and Brad worked together. Brad initially came on, right, Corey, just as a coach in Atlanta?
Yeah, so he was a recent graduate trying to figure out what his path was going to be, and he was coaching a couple club teams and was thinking about maybe getting into being a rec coordinator or a YMCA program manager or something like that. And we sat down, had McDonald's, had a cup of coffee, and I kind of convinced him to come on this journey with me. And he started out working, because all I had at that time was two or three openings. He started out working 2 or 3 coaching blocks, is what we call them, a week. And it's grown to where he had transitioned into the director in Atlanta, and then his wife got a job in Birmingham. And he'd actually come to me. I was devastated that I was going to lose him, but he had come to me asking if there was any way we could keep the partnership going. And so we got involved in Birmingham, and he took over as director there, and now he's kind of helping me from a coach coordination standpoint support all 4 franchises. So it's been a good little story.
And Corey, you use some verbiage there that's natural for you, because I've heard you use it many times before, but I think it's something really important that I want to highlight very specifically. You talk about Brad as a partner, and really, since I've known you, you've always talked about Brad, but not just Brad, anybody that's a part of your team as a partner. And sometimes I'll hear you guys out in the network talk about people in your program, and you talk about them, and you sometimes even use the term employees. And employees, yeah, of course, that is what they are to you. But I think in terms of building that culture and creating that relationship, again, building on what we said last week, I think partnership's a really good way to look at it. We're all partners. And really, if there is a role within our network that is more important than any other one, it's the coaches. I mean, they're the front line. This doesn't happen without them, for sure. So that's something I think worth noting. Corey, when you talk about coach retention and creating a team that has some real good staying power and a program and an organization that has a culture that parents and schools know that they can count on, obviously that means that your coach turnover isn't too high. You and I, through conversations before, you've always mentioned there's kind of 3 categories that you place in terms of different areas of emphasis to improve the retention rate of your coaches. What are those categories that you focus on when talking about retaining coaches?
Well, so as I've grown and added more franchises, I've always, and I think anybody that's had a conversation with a national meeting or over the phone or via email, I always talk about processes and systems. And that's really like the term I use just because it allows me to make it through the day and handle and get through all the stuff that we have to get through. And so I always try to identify the core components of what's going to allow me to build the right kind of coaching staff to be able to handle what we have going. And so the three areas, and I try to make them as as simple to understand as possible, is finding the right coaches, and then once they're found, training them up and getting them prepared and ready to be a coach, and then supporting them once they've gone through that training process. And there's a lot of more detailed components within each three of those things, but from a kind of bird's eye view perspective, if you can look at those three components and develop kind of a system within those three categories, it'll really help you ensure that you're one, finding the right kind of people that are in the right situation, have the right experience, and in the right kind of circumstance, and then making sure that all the components and pieces that you need to put in place to get them ready, whether it's the training classes, local rules, laws, regulations, the expectations, and motivation, and then continuing that through communication, support, and whatever kind of function you want to put together. Andrew, is that what you were hoping that I would have touched on? Did I over-elaborate, under-elaborate? Is there anything that I missed?
Yeah, when I asked the question right away, I got nervous that maybe you wouldn't know what I was talking about. No, you nailed it. So that's what I had always remembered, the notes that I'd taken for you is, and segmenting and bucketing things is something that I think is a part of your nature, but something that I'm trying to follow, because I always understand your perspective or your process for things based on how you segment it out and then explain it. So thanks for that. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because through over the course of the last year, I guess really just in general, like always looking back and reflecting on where things have come from, where we started and where we are now. I think back to the early days for me as a happy feeder, and the coaches that I brought on and hired, and my retention rate being really quite poor. And now that you bucket it this way, it's easy for me to see why, because I spent very little time looking for coaches. I tended to hire the first warm body that said they take the position. I spent even less time training them, and then I didn't support them. And as a result, I think the turnover for me specifically in Springfield and in Kansas City was quite high. And so that's good. And this is one that, Corey, I'd be interested to know if you see these all equally. So if these were all, they make up 100% in terms of guaranteed awesome retention, how would you prioritize them? Would you give them all equal pieces, or would you separate them individually? Would finding be 50% of the importance, or would it be 10%? Does that make sense if I teach that very well?
I mean, I would say finding the right person with the right experience set in the right circumstance is 70, 80%. If you find somebody that's already intrinsically motivated and believes in what this is all about and wants to do the things that you're asking of them to do and is in the right circumstance, that's something that I was talking to you earlier about, Andrew, is their situation one that's set up for them to be successful in this environment being a part-time position where we're asking of them to commit. And in my program, I always ask for almost like a handshake kind of promise that if I bring you on board, you're going to at least give us a year. And in the interview process and through communication, I'm trying to dialogue with them to get a real sense of what their situation is, where their life path is taking them, so I can see if this position falls in line with that. Because if you find somebody that their circumstance allows them to be in this type of position, and their experience and background suggests that maybe this is something that would motivate them and they would want to be a part of, and their schedule is set up as such that they have the ability to do it, and the financial component isn't that big of a factor, then the training and the supporting isn't quite as important, because you know that they're going to be there for you and they're going to go over and above and do the kind of things that you're going to do. So I would say probably most important thing is investing your time and understanding what the right person is for your organization, and then finding those people.
Cool. So what the right person is, that's of huge importance. When you're looking, right, you talk about circumstance, situation. Is that the only category that matters, or are there other categories that you look at too when you're speaking to coaches?
Great question. And I think you and I talked about this, so I'm probably going to push this one back on you because you had mentioned some stuff earlier that I thought was some things that I might try to better incorporate into what I do. But circumstance, situation, I don't start to look at that until I've checked the boxes and all the other qualifiers, right? Like experience with children is really important. In my conversations, do they seem outgoing? Do they seem like they're independent? Do they seem like when they communicate quickly? Like, is their response back to me quick? Do they sound excited when they're communicating with me? Like, I'm trying to get a good feel of, does this person have the personality to be in their car with a bag of soccer balls in the trunk, pulling up to a school ready to represent Happy Feet on their own? Are they going to do the things that are necessary to represent, this little logo the right way when nobody's looking? And so character is something important. Communication is something important. We would love for them. The ideal candidate, obviously, would know soccer in and out and would have several years experience working with children in a group setting. And then after you've qualified from those components, does their schedule match up with your needs as an organization? Because if you're bringing on somebody that's looking for full-time work and you can only provide them 4 days, 4 coaching blocks a week, they might take it because they're in a need to, make some income right now. But if you're never going to get them to what they're looking for, then you're asking for an opportunity for that to not end well. And so ideally, you want somebody that has those qualities and those qualifications, that is in a situation to be excited and motivated to take on the work that you have, and do it for an extended period of time, so that you can focus your energies and efforts in growing the program, improving the relationships with the schools, doing all those things, because you have a rock solid coach that's representing the Happy Feet brand the right way in the schools that they're assigned to.
Yeah, I think you're really hitting some awesome pieces there. For me, like if I'm simplifying it, following your lead, right? I think it comes down to 2 sections. You've got a personality section, is the way I identify it, in terms of looking. Does the coach have the personality, the interest, the character that represents Happy Feet in the brand, just as you mentioned, in the way that it needs to be represented, at the same time as connecting with kids in a way that they're going to enjoy their work. And I think that's important. If you can identify with a coach, are they likely to enjoy what they do or not enjoy what they do? And I think that'll lead you in that direction pretty well. And that's important. I find in interviews, they all would tell you that they're going to enjoy the work. They want this job. So for you've got to determine they have the personality that really is going to enjoy rolling around on the floor with kids, because that's what Happy Feet is. And the second piece, to use your circumstance situation, does it match up with what's going to work for a long period of time? The term that I like to use is, do their needs match our needs? And that's important, right? Do they financially need what we're going to pay them? Or do they need more than we're going to pay them? And that's okay if they need more. Follow up a question, or follow up with a conversation centered around, this is what we've got, but I think you match up, and maybe if you pick up a shift over here with this position, maybe that matches your financial need and it works. And I've found a lot of coaches that way, that if I just did the math quickly and said they need $1,000 a month and I'm going to give them $400 a month, it doesn't work. See you out the door. I've had a lot of coaches that have been around for years, honestly, who only get the $400 that we can afford to pay them, but we kind of talk about and help them find something that fits the need on the other end, and then it comes back around. Yeah. And so needs match needs, and I think that's an important piece to it.
Let me add to that, because once you said that, it triggered a good fit. So in my conversations with any applicant, that statement is always integrated into the conversation. When they apply, I reach out and I'm trying to set up a phone interview or an in-person interview. And what I'm trying to accomplish, and this is what I'm telling the applicant, is that I want to find out if this is a good fit for both of us. So that's where exactly what you were referencing. Our needs meet their needs. And so needs, and then good fit is exactly what we're talking about. And so that's, like you said, personality, circumstance, and I think the third piece, even though I don't think it's as important as the other two, but the third would just be experience, their background and their experiences. So those three things, when you're looking to find that right coach to help build your coaching staff: personality, experience, and circumstance.
Perfect. And let me talk about experience a little bit. Yes, the more experience, the better in most scenarios, but you can find good coaches with a great personality, match needs in a perfect way, and then you can train them up to give them the experience, and that's worth noting for sure. So talking about match needs and who we're looking for from a coaching perspective, and I know we're now 15 minutes into the webinar for 30 minutes, and we're still on the first one, but this one is one that Corey identifies as being really important. I do as well, and so I want to hit it pretty hard before we move to the next bit. But for me, Corey, I tend to find that kids in college, kids just out of college, or kids that are taking a break from college, and stay-at-home parents are all three areas where we've had success finding coaches who've got some staying power, who can be around for a period of time, and really do an excellent job and give us the responsibility that we need and the schools need from us. And so I find that to work really well. Corey, are there any other subset of a person or type of people that work for you? And then to that end as well, as you're bringing those coaches, well, let me just ask, are there any other subsets that work for you quickly?
Those three have typically been kind of the situation that most of our coaches have been in. I would say 70% are college kids, 10% are recent graduates, and 20% are the stay-at-home parent. But we just brought on, and knock on wood, it's been about 6 months, and Julio, who was a recent graduate that came on board as a part-time coach that has since gotten promoted to the director in Atlanta, brought on a retired gentleman who was just wanting to fill his day and was passionate about soccer. His kid grew up in the sport, and he just wanted to stay involved and wanted to go and introduce the sport that he loved to kids. And so that's another subset that we've just tapped into, and we may look to continue depending on how this all unfolds.
Cool. So what I wanted to kind of move into is, when you're going through that interview process with your candidate, right, and you're talking about their needs and and then educating them in terms of what our needs, and then having an open, honest discussion with them about their needs and how they match up with our needs and where there might be holes and if there's a way to work through those holes, I always identify that as being something I want to work through quickly, because the rest of the interview, identifying whether they have the personality to fit in, is something that doesn't matter if their needs don't match. And Corey, it sounded like you kind of do it the opposite. You find out if their personality matches and then fit it in with the other one. And I think both of those routes are probably worthwhile. We wouldn't be doing them if they didn't work for us. Yeah. But is there anything specifically you ask to coaches or talk to coaches about, or your applicants about, in terms of that's unique or different or not obvious that'd be worth sharing as you're hiring college kids or out of college or stay-at-home parents?
I wish I had some magical response to that question. I really don't. So to me, half of my evaluation isn't necessarily the words that are spoken when a question is asked. It's the way in which they respond to it is how I'm kind of evaluating the interview. Do I think that they're engaged and excited about this? When they say that this is something they want to do for 3 years because their circumstance matches up, does that feel like the real answer? Does my gut tell me that that's the truth of the matter? Those kind of things. So I ask very general questions that when you're going to school and taking business classes, they say these are the kind of things you're supposed to ask. And then I just try to interpret the responses to get a good sense of if I think this is the right fit or not. And I mean, just like you had mentioned, and you could probably talk about your progression through like the hiring process. Like 8 years ago, I was hiring. I wanted, some guy that knew how to wear soccer shorts and had cool soccer shoes and had 20 years experience in soccer because I thought he looked cool. And that's what I was looking for. And
looking the part.
Yeah.
You were looking for somebody that looked the part.
Looked the part, yeah. That was, and I've gotten to a point where, and I think I used, it's more important that they can play the part than they look the part. And so if you have a true understanding of what it is we're trying to do as an organization, what Happy Feet does when they go to the preschools, it's much more important that they act the part than they look the part. Because, yeah, they'll look great, and I've learned this over time, they'll look great walking in the door, but when the director and the teachers are walking by class and that guy that looks amazing with his shirt tucked in and his shoelaces tied right and the soccer socks and he's got the hair done up great, has a bunch of kids just running around like goofballs, and the guy has this blank look on his face because he doesn't know how to react and how to respond to it, you're doing a lot more damage than the damage that comes from that is a lot greater than the damage or than the benefit that comes from the guy looking the part. And so it took me a while to learn that, but I did.
That's huge, Corey, and I'm gonna say it again because I think it's really important. I totally agree that when it comes to finding coaches, they've got to be the part and not look the part. Because if you do a good job training and supporting and creating a culture within your team, you'll eventually get them to look the part well enough. They don't need to have a background in soccer. They don't need to be an ex-college soccer player to be a quality Happy Feet coach. In fact, some of the best Happy Feet coaches that we've had in Kansas City have been coaches that didn't touch a soccer ball before they started working for us. And to that same end, all of you guys out there thinking about shining stars, you got to find some super drama experience to make it work. It's the same on the Shining Stars front. You don't need a theater major. You don't even need somebody that's ever spent a moment on stage to run the program. All things being equal, what you need is somebody that's willing to embrace the program, can be passionate about it, wants to do it, and their needs match up with your needs. And there are plenty of examples of that on both the Happy Feet side and the Shining Stars side. Corey, you mentioned something early on that I think bears repeating, and that's in your process, you ask for a commitment. And when you're bringing them on board or you're going through that interview process, you're, one, trying to ascertain how long they're going to stick around. But then when you've decided it seems like they're going to stick around and it's going to work for you, you ask for a commitment. Can you commit to this program for 12 months? Does it work for your schedule to do it for 12 months? And that's something I didn't do early on and something that I do now and I think has a big impact. And I do it for all the positions that I hire for, whether it's a coach or not. Many of you guys might remember David Walburn, who was a big part of our financial piece for a long time. When I hired him initially, I asked him, can you commit to 18 months? He said yes. Honestly, a little bit reluctantly, but I believed him. I thought he'd follow through on his 18 months. 5.5 years later, he was still with us. And so that's important. So moving forward, we're 25 minutes into a 30-minute webinar. So I'm going to skip the training piece. That's obviously an important piece in my opinion and Corey's opinion too, through conversation that we've had related to keeping coaches around. You got to train them well. We've had some webinars in the past that have touched that, and we've got another one that we're going to be doing a show special. It's not on the schedule that specifically goes through the training process, so you can look out for that. But I want to touch the supporting piece because I think this is huge in terms of, and it's something that I've overlooked a lot, and so I would assume other people have overlooked some as well. Corey, do you do anything unique or different, or maybe not even think unique or different? What do you do to help your coaches feel as though they're not on an island? And by that I mean I think the biggest challenge that Happy Feet has, or coaches within the Happy Feet structure has, is that they feel like that they can feel like they're on an island because they're not coming to a place of work every day. They're out and about on their own, and it's oftentimes they go days without seeing a peer.
Yeah, no, the biggest strength of our organization can be the biggest weakness. Like having such a flexible schedule and allowing the coaches to become a part of something and not have to go to that brick and mortar location. You just assign them to schools and they make that part of their day. and there's some freedom to that, right? But what you sacrifice in that environment is a feeling of community, a feeling of being a part of something. Those reminders that you get when you do show up to an office that you're part of something greater than you. You're working towards something that is having a lasting positive impact. And so that's been the challenge that we've had going forward. And it's a never-ending challenge. And part of it is trying to build an environment where they do feel connected. And so, one of the tools that we've been using for a couple of years is just a communication app. It's free. Yeah.
Corey, I'm going to cut in for just a second, just because I think your internet connection just got weak. You were breaking up quite a bit as you do that. And so, just wanted to cut in and see if there's anything you can do on your end, because I don't think anybody else was probably able to hear what you were just saying. But guys, as Corey looks at that really quick, I want to come back to you on this front. This is something that we talked a lot about last week with Holiday Holdaway and Jason in Seattle. That building that relationship with your team and creating that team culture that makes work more fun. Which of course, when you're having fun with something, it makes it difficult to leave. And so, one thing that I mentioned that I have yet to go to the Facebook page with, but I'm going to, and is coming down the pike, is our fun fall competition challenge. Challenge is a better word, because I don't know that we'll have it whenever we might, but challenge in terms of every specific franchise group or coaching team across the country doing some type of social event together. Because if we can connect our coaches in a way that is creative in a way that's fun, that they enjoy, I think it's going to have a big impact on creating that supporting culture, that support-like culture. And so you can look forward to that coming down the pike. Corey, that may be the first you've heard of that. How's your internet over there?
Is this any better? Honestly, I don't know how to fix it. If it's still chopping, then sorry. Is it good? Okay.
Big thumbs up.
All right. I didn't do anything, but I'll take credit for it. So you had asked me. Oh, so what I was just talking about a communication app, and I think everybody might have some sort of approach to communication, but we just use the communication, and so we've got like a coach's channel where I can quickly blast messages in there if we've got maybe a skill of focus that we want to work on that month, or a theme that we want to introduce, or a new game. We place that in the coaches channel so they have access to that, and then the entire team is available in there to engage and have conversation and communicate. The coaches can communicate back and forth. They can reach out to the director, and I try to make sure that the directors stay active and communicate pretty quickly in there, and so that they get the answers that they need when they pop up. And so that kind of is a tool that's used to try to make that on an island feeling be a less little like you're on an island. And then the other thing that we've integrated into what we're doing, and just like Andrew, you've been talking to me about quite a bit lately, is really trying to support the most important, the most integral part of the franchise or the organization is the coaches, and that's something that I want to make sure that they know that they're appreciated. I want to make sure that they are constantly reminded that what they're doing makes a difference and is important and is impacting lives, because that's what is going to excite them to be a part of this and get up every day and go coach those classes, even when they know they're going to one of those schools that is just crazy. They'll still have the motivation and the energy to show up and do a great job for those kids. And I think some of you guys have maybe heard me talking about it. At the national meeting, I kind of gave a presentation about just, and again, Andrew, building a system or a process that can be manageable and that can be implemented and replicated over and over again. So, and that isn't going to take a lot of man hours and effort to accomplish, so that I can ensure that it happens over and over again, is the Promise Program is what we call it. And so it's basically, we as an organization are making a promise, and all of us, given the role that we have within our team, has to hold up their end of the promise to be able to keep the promise that we give to the schools and to the kids and to the parents of our program. And so I break it out seasonally, because so in most of my territories, and I think we're going to introduce a winter league this upcoming season. But in most of the territories right now, we're doing summer league, fall league, and spring league. And so, we've got 2 coaching staffs. We've got a weekly preschool coaching staff and a weekend league staff. And just to make it simple, I broke up the year into 3 seasons, so a spring, a fall, and a summer. And there is basically, throughout that year, there's promises that each coach has to keep. And so the weekly preschool class coaches have certain promises they have to keep. The weekend league coaches have certain promises they have to keep. Now, no matter what, they're going to get compensated at what the coach's compensation is. But if they do the things that we've highlighted and identified throughout that time of the year, we're going to have a little group celebration at the end of the season to celebrate doing a great job and living out the mission and the vision of Happy Feet and delivering the story of Happy Feet to the kids and impacting their lives and all those kind of things. And then they're going to get individual acknowledgement and reward for doing those things. And I don't think we have enough time to go over the details, but basically if the enrollment is growing at the schools and they show up every day and they have good attendance, and when the director goes and does a ride-along with the coach, if all the boxes are checked of the things that they're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis, and there's a couple other things that are incorporated, if they do all those things, then they're eligible for a bonus, and there's an equation that's all tied to that. And then a very similar approach to the weekend leagues. If at the start of the year they say they can make 6 of the 7 sessions, and they show up on time to help set up the fields, and when the director's walking around there doing all the things that are necessary in the session, then that little evaluation is going to result in them getting their reward and getting to come along and be a part of that celebration, so we can all kind of celebrate how things went. So I don't know if that touches on.
I love that, Corey. No, it does, and maybe as we get into this fall, maybe we can do a presentation of some sort, maybe not a webinar or whatever, but some type of presentation on your Promise program, and so that the other people of the network can see it and maybe decide to use bits and pieces or the whole thing. Yeah. So we're coming down to the end, guys. If you have any questions or thoughts you want to add, I think I've got it set up to where you can add them on the screen and those will pop up for us to respond to. I wanted to leave you guys just with a thought that I think is important and now I'm losing it and I didn't write it down and I'm looking at my notes as though I did write it down. Give me just a moment. See if it comes back.
I heard if you look up and left, you can find it a lot better than down and left. Up and left.
That's right, sir. Man, what was it? Oh, yes. So I hope you guys you want to connect your coaches to the greater piece, to everything that we do. And so I've got this quote up here to my right, to your left. The goal is to provide inspiring information that moves people to action, and it's by Mr. Kawasaki, right? And I think that's huge, right? And so a big piece of this puzzle for you with your coaches is to motivate and inspire them. And the best way to motivate somebody, in my opinion, is to look for intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation, I think, oftentimes comes from inspiration. And so share information with them that they'll find to be inspirational, that will motivate them to do a better job and to better plug into the network. And as they better plug into your team, right, and to that culture, then it's going to create a scenario where other people are more motivated to join it, and then it snowballs in the right direction. And with that said, that's a little bit about what we're trying to do with Facebook, with the Shining Stars Happy Feet Legends coach group, and it's baby steps. We're moving in that direction. Obviously, there are still some areas of growth that we can have on that front. But if your coaches within your network aren't in that group, add them to the group, right? There's value to seeing a picture of Corey Miles running or a video of him running a league program in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, even if your coach is in Buffalo, New York. Why? Because Corey's doing it in Baton Rouge and it looks good and it looks cool. And that's inspirational to know that you're part of something much bigger than you are. And so I know there are some coaches in that group from some markets, but obviously we've only got like 140 people in the group. And there are probably more than 500 people just in the United States alone that are working on this program, not to mention some of the other franchises abroad. And so take the time to add them to it. We can remove them from it like that. And so if they leave and you're concerned that they've left, the program, and they're still getting stuff in their Facebook feed about the program. It doesn't take me any time at all to remove them. In fact, I think many of you can probably remove them on your own. And so use that as a way to hopefully provide them with inspiring information that can move them to action, because that, I think, can be really instrumental and key and huge to you. And there's, to that end, there's somebody, I don't know her name personally, I think her name's Dolce, in South Florida, and she's made a few posts. I think she's a coach with maybe some directing responsibility in South Florida, is super passionate about the program, runs some great coaching programs down there in South Florida, and that's hugely positive, and she's really bought in and invested into who we are. And Zoe Kelly, a new coach in Shining Stars in Idaho, has been following along through the Facebook group, and then we've had some exchanges offline as well that have been, I think, enormously positive for me, just being motivated and inspired by her, and hopefully for her as well. And so take the time and invest your people into it. Our network has some great things to offer them. With that said, guys, I think we probably ought to wrap up the show for August 25th, 2016. Hope you guys are having a good end of your summer if your school hasn't started yet, or if you're like us here in Kansas City, your school's gotten started in the last week or so. I hope school year is getting off to a good kick. And see if you can't continue to live the mission, and it's an important one for the kids. Thanks, guys.